and they should be supported, they avoid the fact that her work with the British government on dozens of policy briefs over the past decade have translated into tangible, obscenely funded development policies and projects across Pakistan, a process I call donor-driven Islam. These projects have prescribed an exclusive focus on enabling religious interlopers and strengthening faith-based institutions while deliberately ignoring their possible nexus with jihadist or conservative intent or identities. So the question this morning on is feminism co-optable? It's not just a particular kind of feminism, even Islamic feminism has been shown to have that vulnerability. The blurring of boundaries between the secular and religious is not unique to Pakistan, and of course it can be found in non-Muslim societies too. But it is in the instrumentalization of religion where things become slippery and complicated. In Pakistan, liberal feminist activists have accused the state and political actors of misusing Islam as an instrument of power, particularly the works of Farida Shahid. But interestingly, too many of us as development workers have ourselves been fully complicit with the strategic use of religion as a tool of gender empowerment and for the promotion of human rights, or as we see fit for the right cause. Donors have jumped all over this, while NGOs have actively re-engineered their programs to include faith-based strategies in their ACT projects in order to avail of the pool of funds reserved for such an approach to development in Pakistan. As Cassandra Bolton pointed out in 2011, the term Muslim fundamentalism is now deliberately avoided in the donor community, and weighing in culture has become a factor in policy decisions. The example she cites is whether a polygamous Muslim employee should be considered to be in violation of Oxfam's policy of gender equality or overlooked as a form of respect for cultural or religious specificity for Muslim context. She and the others note how this impact of this strategy of embedding progressive Islam has never been seriously assessed or evaluated. We have no idea about its workability or success. But it has successfully narrowed down available choices for women by limiting empowerment strategies exclusively within the faith-based framework and excluding other secular tools or strategic positioning that may be more effective in order to challenge patriarchal politics. All these studies that I mentioned focus on performativity rather than structural class issues that are intrinsically tied to religious politics. Says Dr. Khalid Masood, the former chairperson of the Council of Islamic Ideology, such faith-based approaches have merely legitimized conservatism and, quote, strengthened the ulama's authority at the cost of development targets and politicized both religion and development, end quote. Apparently, Muslim women have no material nor secular desires. Apparently, they all reject something called Western liberal freedoms and are most content pursuing alternative leadership in mosques and madrasas and finding refuge in religious agency and their hijab and veils. So the question over here is then, why would any state, particularly Pakistan, have a problem with such conformist citizens who demand nothing by way of property rights, nothing by way of reproductive rights, social welfare, or equal citizenship? Instead, these duty bearers can be placated by their unequal inheritance and marital rights as long as they have other rights to observe the veil, hold darses, proselytize in home-based madrasas for the long run. If you notice, all these demands are about propriety and conduct, not the material nor the political. In the post-9/11 period, the very relevance of liberalism and secularism, and indeed feminism, all of which used to be the primary targets of conservatives and Islamists, have since been challenged quite directly from these new sources. For those of you who comfort yourselves that these are simply academic exercises or it is alarmist to be concerned about this, I would challenge you to select a single Anglo-American piece of scholarly work produced over the last decade in this field that doesn't question or challenge women's rights and activism for equal rights, or for the repeal of Islamist laws, or which confronts Islamic militancy, or indeed our campaigns against child marriage or honor crimes, even girls' education, without accusations or pushback that I pointed out earlier. To think that this post-feminist thrust does not discredit the women's movement is to be deliberately myopic, and it is an indifference only the political neutrals can afford. There are two last additional clarifications I want to offer here. First, diaspora, which is not the same as overseas Pakistanis. Diaspora is not simply a casual reference to some disconnected community. It is an academic term and a commonplace category of analysis. Objections to using this term, particularly in academic work, to identify this category are really quite silly. In particular, diasporic theory attempts to study migrant and minority populations and their citizen-foreigner hybrid positionality and their own preoccupation with their difference and fixation with the past. There has been quite a lot of work done on this, particularly in England, the works of Stuart Hall and Saba, on how diasporic communities create or attempt to recreate coherent or collective memories for their fractured or displaced experiences and subjectivities which may have been denied or erased or appropriated in their foreign context. In the case of Pakistani diaspora, their production of post-9/11 scholarship, literature and art clearly stresses on the leitmotif of Islam or nostalgia for some radical left politics which may have never existed, or indeed some other sanitized cultural memories. Apart from the post-secular scholarship that I've already mentioned, there is the genre of the Mohsin Hamid Hollywoodized novel, The Reluctant Fundamentalist, and Pakistan's best hidden talent, that is truck art, which can now be found more in art galleries around the world than on actual trucks. There is also the fashion of Pakistani-American women emigres who write autobiographical voyeuristic pieces for Anglo-American media, which detail the trials and tribulations of being brave, divorced Muslim women who have survived the cultural, not religious, repression of sexuality and patriarchy in Pakistan. They are the moderate counter-examples to the Ayan Ali Hirsi and Irshad Manjis and others considered to be the Islamophobic type of Muslim women. So these moderate Muslim women take pains to explain to the New York Times how their polygamous, veiled aunts in the attic were really very happy embracing their secondary status, just like their Mormon sisters in America. This is that Rafia Zakaria's New York Times upstairs wife, not aunt in the attic, upstairs wife novel that she wrote. I also regret now that at the age of 20, I didn't write my novel called The Sufi Second Wives of Sin Club, which I could have taken me somewhere in Sweden, where I could have been fighting for the rights of Muslim women to be in polygamous marriages and wear their burkinis at the same time. But apparently there's a Pakistani British man who has beaten me to it, and he has a website called polygamy.com or secondwives.com or something, which is only for male subscribers. And his reasoning is actually very interesting. He says it makes business sense because can't offer women this service because they can't afford polygamy. Okay? So this is when the post-secularists jump in and say, see, this is an example of Islamist secularization. Can't you get it? But what's happening in fact is that all these contributions and theories produced by the feminists of the 1980s and 1990s are getting rehashed and subverted at the same time. In any case, my point is just that in this post-9/11 body of work, the line between fiction and realism, this line between fiction and realism, particularly on the issue of religion and its relationship with feminism, human rights, and secular activist resistance, has been thin and misrepresented. And a corrective is critical, in my opinion, for the academic and political records. Shaila Zia in 1998 had no hesitation calling out Pakistani diaspora, especially, quote, women scholars, many of whom live outside of the country, away from the conflicts and tumults which confront the movement, who criticize its conceptual framework without any real perception of the situation on the ground. Zia suggests that, quote, perhaps what all these supportive critics have in common is that they manage to absolve themselves of the guilt of their own inaction, end quote. Akbar Zaidi has no patience for the role of Pakistani diaspora located in the World Bank and IMF or in think tanks, and who influence development policy for Pakistan and even become prime ministers during their sabbaticals, prime ministers plural. While it is not necessary that diaspora is some cohesive, homogeneous group, certainly there's been superb work, not only by diaspora, but also non-native scholars on Pakistan. But on the issue of peddling Islamic identity and challenging local native feminist strategies, this criticism should be, at the very least, informed and nuanced. On being drawn upon as experts on Islamic laws and blasphemy cases, it is even more disturbing that the knowledge of diasporic scholars is often based on news reports or social media engagement or outsourced through researchers from LUMS and maybe even as brief tourists to Pakistan during their vacation time. There are other complications. Islamophobia is now a United Nations recognized form of discrimination. But as Bronwyn Winter has pointed out, the troubling aspect of this is that, quote, the United Nations conflates Muslim people with Islam as belief system and religious practice and turns racism, which is structural, systemic and translates through acts of hatred and violence, into literally a fear of religion and focuses on religions rather than racialized people. I think that the displacement of a secular Asian left politics and diaspora is also a casualty of this kind of communalized religious injury and should concern and call the attention of socialists and feminists alike, but it has been under-discussed and under-analyzed. Moreover, in my interest, in my Muslim context, I question why the definition of Islamophobia does not include the intense hatred and rejection amongst and between the wide variety of Muslim sects who deny, campaign, vilify and denigrate each other's Islam and sometimes rationalize murder of other Muslims under the compulsions of Islamic competitiveness. Can only white people and secular feminists be Islamophobic? The generous assistance of diaspora who analyze us long distance in order to muddy the waters and who offer post-secular and post-Islamist possibilities as viable options, while themselves securely located within their secular and multicultural, sexually free, upwardly mobile academic careers, is counterintuitive and counterproductive. Secondly, I have been consistently critical of the limitations of liberal politics in Pakistan, which includes the compromise politics of NGOs, as discussed this morning, which many of us have traced in previous years, but also the kind of self-congratulatory and unaccountable social media activism that is celebrated today as some game changer, but usually only by the subscribers. Meanwhile, the kind of activist research that is being produced within our development sector can best be characterized as one where Marxist politics has been replaced by magic realism analysis. Feminist politics has retreated from public collectives to online chat rooms. Social scientific work on class identity has been sidelined in favor of easily digestible ethnographic accounts of religiously empowered Muslim women in Punjab or the tribal child victim of imperialism in Khattak. Since these are also now very last season, the attention deficit impatience means we must now look to resolve Kashmir and Balochistan through the lens of political selfie journalism. Certainly, if you note, gender issues have become part of a broader national narrative, and they have even been embraced by the birth of the new age public intellectual who may have no involvement with women's groups or feminist politics and no accountability to any political ideology or collective. These floating observers or concerned voyeurs feel confident writing about all women's issues, the most popular being honor crimes, based on social media circulated information and opinions, but their focus is also almost always on performativity and some legal tweaking, but certainly not on feminist political change, which suggests to me that these commentators write for readership and likes and reform, but they are not motivated by transformative or challenging politics. To conclude, I just want to point out that I have always maintained that the Pakistani state is neither secular nor an Islamic republic. And I don't mean it in the way Salman Rushdie derisively described Pakistan as insufficiently imagined. Rather, I suggest there is sufficient evidence and imaginings of secular resistance and aspirations. These are not based on some Western nor Indian models of secularism. Most of the time we look to the Javed Akhtar and Shabana Azmis for explaining what Indian secularism, please don't. You know, there is a lot more work on it. But this secularism is not based on either Western or Indian models of secularism, and neither are secular possibilities in Pakistan Islamist in imagination. But these expressions are non-conformist interruptions They are countercultural sites which disrupt the national religious narrative, and they challenge the heteropatriarchal combined forces of culture and religion, particularly Islam. Whether these are embodied in the activism of the lady health workers who have been systematically assassinated by the Taliban for their polio work, or the Ukkada peasant women's struggles, or the women councillors' activism throughout Pakistan, the resistance to theocratization of school curriculum and textbooks, or the expansion of women's sexual expression in mainstream and social media in defiance of clerics, or women fighting Islamists who prevent them from playing cricket on university campuses, or the challenges by groups and the reform by political parties of discriminatory religious laws and judgments, or indeed the Sindh government's amendment to the Child Marriage Act, making 18 the legal age in defiance of the advice of the Council of Islamic Ideology, which wanted to legalize child marriage. All these and more processes of secularization show that secular possibility is the pivot that has the potential to realign center-periphery relations, whether these are to do with different provincial cultures or between religious minorities and majoritarian populations. Secular expression and resistance challenges any single-axis lens through which the nation and society is imagined. I urge we need to claim this rather than apologize, neutralize, fear, deny, or delegitimize such a politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Afiya. Perfect timing. So we'll open the floor for discussion. Also clarification. And please keep your questions short and introduce yourself as well. Okay. Now I'm open. Okay. If there are no burning questions, okay, there is a hand. I think Neelum rightfully is saying maybe she should make her comments first and then we can open the floor. So, I'm sorry, we'll go with Neelum first.
Okay, thank you and thank you, Afiya, for a very interesting paper. I think Afiya has raised a number of very important questions that address a number of assumptions and presumptions that are current in popular conversations. One, the kind of overwhelming singular focus on Islamic terminology and language. Again, the popular or much doubted assumption that we are a Muslim society, therefore no other discourse flourishes here. As she herself has shown, I mean, these are part of current imaginings. I will just go through her paper and comment as I go along, I mean, not in detail. Starting with this heavy focus and funding of international scholarship for Pakistani students, I think we need to keep in mind the role this has played in foregrounding a particular discourse. I don't know why this has become fashionable, or maybe I do, but there's not the space and time to discuss it here. But it has created a kind of hegemonic discourse of and an exoticization of Islamic writing or Islamography, which does not necessarily reflect ground realities. In terms of Muslim women's secular resistance, I think she's very rightly pointed out that there has not been a rejection of religion in the laicity of Pakistani women's movements associated with the Jawla, but a rejection of his attempt to turn the church into a kind of state into a kind of a mosque or a church. And the resistance was to that, which did not mean that the women who came into the women's movement were part of it were all atheists, or all Muslims, or all staunch practicing Muslims. It was a mixture of women who accepted their identity as Muslim or rejected their identity as Muslim, but were part of Muslim culture, but who were responding and reacting to a particular politics. And I think, I'm glad Afiya has made that distinction. I would contend, I have one disagreement, Afiya. You that the Pakistani, you say that before Zia happened, the women's movement was liberal and equal rights, with a focus on equal rights. I think there were multiple streams. There was the liberal stream represented by APA, and there was the left-wing stream represented by the Democratic Women's Association. And WAF itself, when it happened, was a mixture. In fact, predominantly the founding members were coming out of left-oriented experiences and backgrounds in work. So there is this. So our struggle was against the theocratization of our culture and country, not against Islam as such. Islamic feminism, I agree, Islamic feminism does seek to develop or show a compatibility between women's rights and Islam. And it's a tough battle because on the one hand they focus upon almost textual adherence to what is in the book and try to develop rights along that trajectory, or then look for justifications within the piety movements. My main criticism of these piety movements is that they dehistoricize the process. Saba, for instance, talks of the Dars movement or the piety movement as something that has grown organically out of society. I don't know about Egypt because I haven't studied the situation. I think if we were to go into it, we would again also find cracks in that organic metaphor. But certainly in Pakistan, the piety movement was state-sponsored. There was nothing organic about it. It was forced down our throats through the media, through government policy, until it became a trend, mainly because of coming together, a convergence of interest between the right-wing fundamentalist lobby, the Jamaat-e-Islami, and the opportunistic upper classes, which have always gone that way. And I remember the shift from the coffee party to the Milad and then to the Dars. And the same ladies who were quite happy playing bridge at 11 in the morning or meeting each other at coffee parties would then be found with their heads covered, enjoying the same kind of delicious foods at a Dars or a Milad. So nothing organic about it. It was a question of state-sponsored agendas and fashionable trends. Later, of course, it changed as it spread. And I'm not denying there's not been a discursive shift because of that. I would agree on your criticism of Humaira Iqtadar's writing.